Wide Benefits Sharing Agreement was launched between the South African rooibos industry and the Khoi and the San councils. Having been to the areas where the Sans and the Khans live, the Khois rather, I have been able to see the pride and the joy that you see on their faces as they talk very proudly of this age-old plant that is now benefiting their lives in more ways than one, and how they themselves participate in not only the harvesting, but the nurturing and the caring and the replication of this plant. Now, this agreement has to date distributed a total of 28 million rand to 2 councils in recognition of the community's indigenous knowledge of the rooibos species. Another product is the alu plant, a plant that is indigenous to Southern Africa and is harvested for pharmaceutical and cosmetic purposes. To date, approximately 46 million has been paid by permit holders directly to Alu Forex tapers. Now, Alu Forex is just one of the countless indigenous species with medicinal and other value that are being used in commercial applications. There are many others. There's also Scaletium, the marula, which I'm sure many of us know. If you have not imbibed in the marula drink, you ain't a true South African. There's also Pelargonium and Buchu, the shrub that has been used by the Khoi and the San for healing and traditional rituals for centuries. Approximately 29 million rand has been paid to traditional authorities in the Eastern Cape, as well as in the Northern Cape, the Northwest, in KZN and Limpopo, in recognition of indigenous knowledge associated with these species. And one should meet the people who are involved in caring for these plants, in harvesting these plants, and you can see that they are benefiting and they see this as an opportunity that is transforming their lives. We know that compensation in recognition of indigenous knowledge held by communities is not enough. We know that payment to communities for harvesting these species is also not enough. There must be tangible beneficiation in communities when indigenous plant species are harvested for commercial benefit, whether it is for medicine, cosmetic, or other purposes. Sustainable mass cultivation of indigenous plant species must support the creation of businesses, must also support the establishment of factories and other value chain networks that allow for end products to be exported to the rest of the continent and indeed abroad as well. This mass cultivation can also assist land restoration and also land rehabilitation, as well as carbon sequestration, which is important in the context of climate change. Now, to ensure a more holistic approach to access and benefit sharing, we are developing nurseries for the production of indigenous species. So these species can be cultivated for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. When it comes to animal species, beneficiation must result in the establishment of community-run businesses, be they lodges or game, meat, butcheries, and, and production facilities. We have now developed a game meat strategy that is focused on scaling economic enterprises for communities and previously disadvantaged individuals, and also providing land use patterns that are compatible with our conservation ambitions. There are already a number of commercially successful game meat production facilities in several parts of our country. Another example is the marine biodiversity. For many decades, fishing was the preserve of commercial enterprises only. This is something we are working hard to change. In January this year, we allocated 15-year fishing rights to small-scale fishing sector in the 4 coastal provinces. But we must build on this. Job creation must be at the center of our efforts. Over the weekend, as I was campaigning in the Eastern Cape, I met one of these beneficiaries who sat next to me at lunch, and we were having wonderful fish, a carpenter, which I hadn't tasted in a long time. And he said, "President, a small-scale fishermen and women, we are doing extremely well. In the past, we were locked out of this industry. Now we are participating. And now you are even indulging in the fish that we caught." And I wondered whether he was, spreading some butter over my eyes, because how could he identify that the fish I was eating was really caught by him and his fellow fishermen? But as president, you do accept stories that people tell you, particularly during a campaign, because you can't be second-guessing people who are potential voters. As our mineral resources, we cannot simply be mere exporters of raw minerals, and I often say the days when we continue exporting stones, rocks, and dust and soil should now be over. We must beneficiate our minerals here, right here in South Africa. Like the message of localization. When we started talking about localization, those who are still tied to the Northern Hemisphere economies, where we've tended to import a lot of our products, were very critical of us. And they said, this is a pipe dream. It's a dream that will never be realized. And they argued that it would be more expensive for us to localize, and said that they did not believe that it would take off. It is now taking off. We're localizing more and more and insisting that those products that can easily be manufactured here, even with great difficulty, should be manufactured here so that we can stop exporting jobs and make sure that the jobs are here in South Africa so that we can develop our own nation. Many nations have developed their own countries by localizing, making things for themselves, making their own products, and thereafter exporting them. And it is for this reason that we are also insisting on the beneficiation of our minerals. We are the leading mineral-rich country on the continent up to date hereof. It was not only in gold, which was our best mineral in the past, but we have a plethora of other minerals, indigenous resources that come from this country that we need to beneficiate so that we can export fully finished products to other countries and create jobs here in South Africa. And we are going to do that. Whether they like it or not, we are going to do precisely that. Now, this is what a revised biodiversity economy strategy aims to achieve and to address. It aims to synergize our economic and conservation objectives by emphasizing that a successful biodiversity economy must be linked to the restoration of ecosystems. It broadens the existing terrestrial goals and adds marine, coastal, estuarine, and freshwater opportunities. Now, this strategy places the transformation of biodiversity sector at the center of all that we do. Now, rural communities that have always been relegated to the back, that have always suffered through disadvantage, must be put at the center of what we do. Our traditional leaders must be part of devising new approaches to investment in community-owned land for biodiversity-based enterprises. So this Indaba is a great opportunity for business entities, conservation management authorities, and previously disadvantaged people in our country and communities to pitch their biodiversity business concepts to potential investors. And I would say that this is an opportunity for all those to put their best foot and their best plans forward. The projects include investment opportunities with national parks, World Heritage sites, botanical gardens and provincial nature reserves, community-owned wildlife businesses, like what we saw on the video earlier, a most moving story, bioprospecting and ecotourism. For us to fully harness the benefits of biodiversity, economy thereof, we have to understand its scope, its breadth, and also the opportunities that it gives rise to. So work is underway to develop natural capital accounting for biodiversity sector. This is being done through the partnership between the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment, also Stats SA, and the South African National Biodiversity Institute. Now, the initiative will ensure that the contribution of the biodiversity sector, including its entire value chain, is formally recognized and embraced. Now, the Global Biodiversity Framework that was adopted in December 2022 aims to ensure that biodiversity is valued, that it is conserved, that it is restored, it is nurtured and wisely used, sustaining a healthy plant and delivering benefits essential for all people. Now, the framework itself has three central aspects. The first is the recognition that human and ecosystems sustainably require a global target of 30% of the land and 30% of the sea to be placed under protection by 2030. The second is that communities living in and around or adjacent to conservation estates must benefit from the economic opportunities that are created. And this is simply based on the adage that nothing about us without us, and going further to say we must not be left behind. We must benefit also from whatever is eked out of the land that inherently belongs to us as given down the lines by our ancestors. The third aspect is that the intellectual property of indigenous people must be recognized as well as compensated. There is also agreement that developed economy countries must assist developing economies in achieving global conservation targets. The work to conserve and restore our biodiversity takes place as the world is experiencing an increasingly destructive effect of climate change. African countries are among the most vulnerable to the effects of a rapidly changing climate. They have to adapt and build resilience within the context of historically low levels of development and severely limited capacity. And this having been given rise to by colonialism, which really damaged the development prospects of most of our continent. The Climate Change Bill, which is currently before the National Council of Provinces, seeks to enable a just transition towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient society, as we've always talked about. This just transition must contribute towards the creation of decent work for all, social inclusion, and the eradication of poverty. It largely revolves around our slogan that no one must be left behind. In whatever we do as we transit to new energy, either technologies and so forth. The bill recognizes that a robust and sustainable economy, as well as a healthy society, depend on the services that well-functioning ecosystems provide. The bill maintains that enhancing the sustainability of economic and social and ecological services is an integral component of an effective and efficient climate change response. Now, a just transition puts people at the center of decision-making, especially those that are most affected by the transition, by empowering and equipping them for the new opportunities of the future, by skilling them, upskilling them, and reskilling them, and properly equipping them to be active participants in the new economies. And there are going to be new sectors of the economy that are going to arise. We've reached that moment when there's going to be, as we move forward, an explosion of great opportunities in various sectors of the new transition landscape. We must put rural communities at the center of every decision-making process and ensure that we are empowering and equipping them for the new opportunities in the biodiversity sector. Just as we will rely on forging meaningful partnerships between business, government, and communities to grow and restore our country's conservation estate. We also need to deepen collaboration on ventures that help us to mitigate and adapt to climate change and its ongoing effects. So carbon sequestration projects are one such example for which funding streams are needed. And I call on industry, on finance institutions, philanthropies, civil society, and traditional leaders, healers as well, and practitioners, to collectively embrace our vision for a transformed biodiversity economy. This biodiversity economy can yield enormous benefits. The areas where our people live now should now begin to be transformed from dead capital to beneficial capital. And as we look at the landscape of where our people live, we should now be looking at it through a different lens, a lens of development, a lens of adding value, and a lens that will lead to great benefits for our people. Now, the scientific research and academic community has also an important role to play in all this. The Council for Science and Industrial Research, the CSIR, for instance, is doing important work around identifying and developing the use of traditional plants and plant-based remedies for commercial use. It's always a joy to me when I go to the CSIR and just see the wondrous works that they do. These scientists who just move like ants, day in and day out, creating things, new things, and researching. And this is one of the great endowments that we have as a country, which many countries, particularly on our continent, do not have. We have a CSIR that is able to lead the charge in researching new areas, new products, and helping to bring them to market. Collective action can shape a future in which both nature and people thrive. The success of the initiatives that will come out of this Indaba will not only enable us to meet our international sustainable development obligations, they will also empower especially rural communities and rural economies and create jobs and support our industrialization efforts. Now, when one goes to rural areas, you just often get so sad to look at rural areas that you can see are just dormitories where people live. There's hardly much economic activity that happens. And as one goes around, what you see are living abodes, and you also see schools, you see churches, and you see open land. For the most part, that's what you often see. And yet lying hidden, like Rembrandt's or Gerard Sikoto pieces lying in the attic, are the endowments that our people should now utilize: the land, the plants, and everything else that is in our rural communities. Those need to be brought to life. That is the residual capital that we have that needs to be utilized, and so that that dead capital can become real capital in the hands of our rural communities. So I wish you well in your deliberations and look forward to seeing the results that will emerge from this Indaba. I do believe that assembled here, I would say, is the brains trust of our country when it comes to biodiversity matters. And you are the ones, all assembled here, who will always find solutions to some of the challenges and problems that confront us. For instance, Premier, you spoke about ice cream. Now, I'll throw a problem at you. Problem that I'll throw at you is if you take ice cream, which you spoke about, and mix it with cow dung, what do you get? I want you to work that one out, because you started talking about ice cream. And many of our people here do get to walk through cow dung. So when you mix the two, what do you get? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you about the flavor of ice cream that Premier Lesotho is inventing here. Mr. President, thank you very much for locating the work that we have been doing here within the broader